and with that, I would like you to see and introduce you to the first talk that we have today. Please say hello to Kurt, Sam, and Andre from InfoTrack. They are going to talk about change, specifically about how to manage change in the ever-growing design system at InfoTrack. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yep.
Yes, and I can hear you too. That's fantastic. You excited about this?
Nervous, then excited, I would say.
I mean, really, we are totally alone in this, right? Like, who can tell if anyone is listening?
I can't actually see the audience here, so it could be one person, and I never know. So I might just stick to that hope.
Yeah.
This is really an elaborate prank for me to really just get a lot of talks for me for design systems, because I like design systems. So it's literally just me. With that out of the way, I think you should take over the screen and give your talk.
Well,
thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay. Just want to confirm, Dom, that you can see everything is appearing as normal.
Everything is perfect.
Perfect. Okay. Hello, audience listening in. We're InfoTrack, and we're here to tell you the tale of introducing the design system in our company and what we learned about change on the way and how we're managing that as we grow our design system. So I'm Kurt. I'm a product designer at InfoTrack.
I'm Sam, another product designer at InfoTrack as well.
And I'm Andre. I'm a front-end developer at InfoTrack.
So what is InfoTrack? InfoTrack is a company that provides information and workflow technology to the legal industry. Informally among us, a way to easily understand us is as the Google for the stuff you can't find on Google. And who are our users? Our clients, they're solicitors, paralegals, and conveyancers across pretty much every industry of Australian law. And essentially how they interact with us is when they're completing their work and they need to find information about whatever legal matter they're involved in, they will most likely be going through us to find that information. So we're providing them with that information and also offering some, SaaS technology for them to interact with as they do it. But our users are very detail-oriented, very opinionated, very habitual, and very change-adverse. If anybody knows old lawyers, you might know what I'm talking about. And Zenith is our design system. And we began working on it in June 2019. We'll be jumping a bit into detail into the design system itself later. But here we're going to talk about what design systems affect. And in our experience, since we started working on it, most people think that it's just the middle section, that it affects the users, and that's like the primary impetus for a design system. But it affects much more, and it changes much more than just the user's habits and the user's expectations and experience. It affects the business, it affects their budget, it changes the operation of their departments. It also forces a shift in their perceived value of design. The users, it's pretty self-explanatory, it changes pretty much everything for them. But it also heavily changes the developers in the company. It's something that they all must adopt, which will typically involve a pretty drastic change in their process, their workflow, their knowledge, and even their values. So first we're going to talk about the business, which will be my part, and then Sam's going to cover the users and Andre is going to cover the developers. So as I said, we began the design system in June 2019. We were all hired in May 2019, the design team were. And the reason for our hire was this statement from the business. They wanted an update to the UI, and they wanted to bring InfoTrack as a product into the 21st century. This is what InfoTrack looked like when we were hired. And when we were brought on, we saw a bunch of products like these two, which are two different products that InfoTrack offer. that are completely isolated in their components and their UI. They don't share anything, and this can be set across like many of the products. InfoTrack have a whole bunch of products, and none of them share any common design language. And as you can imagine, it was a pretty impressive pile of technical debt. So it was a much deeper change to create a design system than the business had anticipated. And from the start, we had been advocating for that. And we had a big monumental task of getting the business on board with that. This picture here is essentially a hunt for all of the different buttons we found on the core platform of InfoTrack, just to highlight how much variation there was. And here's some of the things we learned about catalyzing that change that we saw in the business. The first big lesson, it's very important to generate hype and involvement in order to get everybody to empathize with the problem that you're trying to communicate. So what we had at first was a company-wide UI hunt with prizes, almost like gamifying the company and their ability to identify the problem as we saw it. We got all of the business to go across and hunt all of the unique pieces of UI that we could find, and the winner, the person who found the most, was rewarded with a prize. So we created a Slack channel for it, and everybody went out there hunting, looking for some snowflakes. And what it did, it showed to the business that more UI would just add to the technical debt pile, but it also educated the teams, and it took them out of their own isolated, team. Instead of always working on this one product, they looked through the products at large and they saw how much fragmentation there was, and it gave them that context and that empathy as for to the problem in the same way that we saw it, and it just made everybody just from the very start much more receptive to that idea of that we need to change this. Secondly was identifying the value of a design system in each department. So obviously every department has their own motivations and their own values and their own outcomes, and they won't all respond well to change. They all are scared that change is going to impact them negatively, that it's out of their control, and they don't want their jobs made harder. And so it's really important to address the fears, solve the problems, and actually seek feedback and involve each department in the decision-making process where it affects them in creating a design system. So here is just some examples of how we dealt with that in the departments that we have at InfoTrack. In operations, a big concern in them was obviously a big change in the user experience is going to affect all the clients. And then there would be an influx of calls because they don't know how to use a new system. And they were very scared of that change and having their life made really difficult for them. But we collaborated with them and got them on board in a complete reimagining of the iSupport experience, how it could all be accessible from one location, that maybe we can create it in a way where they don't need to call in the first place, where we can control, and moderate how it comes in and how we get back to it. And in collaboration with that, instead of fearing it, they started to get excited about the change. And it just made that transition a whole lot easier in the operations department. And the executive team. So I won't talk about buy-in too much. I think there's a lot of guides out there on how to get buy-in from management, the atomic design principle, or highlighting how much money it's going to save. But I think some of the unique concerns that our business had was that there wasn't really a way to measure success, and they were worried about the time spent on Zenith versus the time that they could be spending, that developers could be spending working on products. So to help get them on board with this notion of introducing a design system, we said we would release it with a feedback toast that would establish a benchmark for the UI feedback, but also give us good qualitative feedback. So in that way, we were able to track how successful it was over time, and it gave them the confidence that they needed to allow us to continue with this. And marketing. So another department that's concerned with the brand experience, or the experience of the product for the user. And they were scared essentially about not being in control of the brand anymore, and us making decisions that were conflicting with the decisions that they had made in their marketing material. So working with them to help create the atoms of the design system and basing it, off some of their principles, like their color palette, their typography, and expanding on that, allowed us to define the atoms as we needed them, as versatile as we needed them, but still staying familiar with the established brands so they could continue with what they were doing and feel confident that we weren't going to deviate from their directive. And sales and account management. So they were concerned about having to relearn all of the products that they were selling, because this new design system was a complete overhaul of the experience. And it requires a lot of time and investment for sales to learn all these products, to effectively demonstrate them to prospective users. And a way to help get them on board is just integrating them into your process, like bringing them to the reviews and the demos, and taking the feedback from them and seeing that feed into it, because they are the ones that are exposed to a lot, most of the user feedback. They will hear it all the time. The account management are kind of like the card holders of all of the feedback that clients get when they're happy, when they're angry. And so involving them and letting their feedback integrate into the designs is a great way to get them excited, because they love selling good products. And they love it more when they feel like they're being heard. And so there is a big aspect of the new design system, which is the shortcuts that we introduced that were completely customizable, so the user didn't have to navigate the menus anymore, and they could just only use the services that were highly applicable to them. That original piece of feedback came from sales, and they were really pleased to see that implemented in the actual product, and found it much easier to sell afterwards. And finally, the developers. So they feared a change in their fundamental habits and adopting a new paradigm of working. So it's really important to engage developers early, right from the beginning, and communicating the context. It was absolutely crucial for a shared belief in the project. And also for us designers, some change for us is just educating ourselves about the development process. It enables us to make better decisions and create less work for those around us. Even simple things like, understanding how not to design a component you built in a way that it causes a breaking change for a developer, or where they have to customize a component. It just gives them more value in the project and gets them on board a lot better. And thirdly is another big important lesson we learned was managing your own expectations. So I'm sure that when everybody starts out with a new design system, that they have this grand vision of what it's going to be like, because you can go online, you can go and look at, Westpac's global experience language, or you can go look at, Atlassian design guidelines, or you can go look at Carbon by IBM, and you can see this site with all the resources publicly available for everybody, with all of the code and the patterns. It's all up there, and that is where we want to get to. But there's a lot of steps in between here and there, and you can't get there straight away. I like to refer to them as little gremlins, but once you overcome the gremlin, you learn from it, and you're able to iterate on it, and you put that learning experience back into the design system. But it's important to know where to start. So it's a lesson that we learned, I think, twice along the way, about the right place to start. Initially, we had looked at what we saw online and thought, how can we emulate that? How can we replicate that and make a very publicly accessible design system so it gets visibility from across the company and everybody can easily go on and see, and have a look at the components and get the code that they need to, or get an understanding about how it's supposed to be used. And initially, we went with InVision DSM, but after not very long at all, we realized that the design system was the one that we had was very, very young and very, very volatile. And having to maintain a third-party resource and update that documentation and re-upload the components to it, and have developers change their habits so fiercely that they have to, use another third party to host the code, that would probably change every given week as the design system was finding itself. We were spending more time updating the documentation than actually working on the design system. And so pretty quickly we moved across to Zero Height, which was better. It was much more far better on the budget. It also had good integrations with Storybook and Sketch at the time we were using for that one as well. And it was good, But again, it still required developers to maintain a third-party resource, as well as us to manually go in and update the components. And again, we still hadn't solved that problem of dealing with the volatility of a design system. It is always changing. It's continually finding itself. And in this young phase, we needed something that could be as agile and adaptive as we were without being a resource drain. So we finally decided that for now, to basically keep up with the agility that we have it on, we would host it in Figma and keep it in there and create a single source of truth for the documentation, for the components, for everybody to use. So I'm going to quickly jump in now and just show it to you. So this is it. What we've done is we've broken it up into an introduction section to get people on, so people can on board with it and understand a little bit of information about it. There's a what, why, and a how. A getting started for designers and developers. We've put our design values up in here. And we've also got a table of contents linking to everything that we currently have. And as you can see, we've taken the atomic structure where we've got it broken down into styles, so the base building blocks, and then moving up to components, and then finally patterns, which are just the assembly of all of the components. And as you look through here, it's just all accessible from the menu. If I wanted to go to the colors, I can come in here, I can have a look with a bit of information about how they're applied, where they should be applied, and then if I move on to the components, you've got things like the badges or the buttons, and you can come into here and you can see all the information you need to about how this button should be applied, all the various states of it, as well as all of the different variations of buttons. And then further on, we move into things like the organisms. We can come in and see the date picker with just lightweight information about how it's meant to be applied. And the intention here is to make it lightweight. We didn't want to weigh ourselves down with documentation. We didn't want to spend time, talking about how the component needed to be used when it was just as likely that we might, in our learnings, when it's getting used, take on feedback and then the component changes. And when it becomes a more stable library, that's when we're going to invest more time into documentation. That's when we're going to possibly look at hosting it somewhere where the code and the design all exist in the same place. But for now, this is where we are, and it perfectly suits, our progress through the journey of design systems. So, next point, second last one for me is using the tools that work best for your situation. So, the question of, do tools matter? I think that the answer is yes, they do matter, but there's not one that's objectively better. It's all about picking the tool environment that suits you. Originally, we'd started with Sketch and Craft and InVision, but we were finding that was causing too many discrepancies between design and development. We were too time poor to go into projects and update the InVision through Craft after we'd made a change in the component library, and it was just creating too much overhead. And our move to Figma removed that because it suited the agility that we needed in our products. And there was a teething period in this change, especially teaching the entire development team about how to effectively use Figma. But series of lunch and learns and just making yourself available to answer their questions, it did lead to much greater efficiencies for us. And then finally, a simple one, but important one, is to be its biggest advocate. Don't be quiet about it. Be really loud. Change takes time. Everyone's resistant to it. Even now, we struggle to find the capacity for everything we need to do, but incessant nagging does work. We did recently get research and validation phases into the product manager's roadmaps as a standard thing, which is something that InfoTrack had never done before, and a great step towards user-centered design. So that's it from me. They're some of the lessons we learned about changing the business. I'm now going to hand it over to Sam.
Hey guys, how's it going? All right, the user. So I want you to close your eyes and imagine the situation for me. You've just woken up and you got to get ready for work. So it's your time to make your coffee. You walk into the kitchen and you go to find your mug, but now there are plates in the mug drawer. You know, that fiendish product designer has moved them all again. There's a note about why it's better this way, but you don't have time to read it because you're already late for work because you spent so long trying to find your mug. So then, so then you finally get yourself together, you go to work, you spend your day there, and then you come back, but you've forgotten all about the drama from this morning, and the next morning you wake up and you do it all again. That's sort of the position that our users somewhat get put in when we go through change like this. So now that we can empathize with our users, who are they? So we have three main types of users. The first one being solicitors. They are typically older, more habitual, and they've assigned their tasks to muscle memory, and change for them is often met with a great deal of resistance. They know what they want to do, they know how to do it, and they just want to get it done. Paralegals are more adaptive to change. They have really high workloads and a heavy user of our system. So they're always seeking efficiencies and trying to find ways to speed up their tasks. Conveyancers, they value speed above everything else. They're highly price sensitive and they hate it when things slow them down. They get really frustrated and we'll get a lot of nasty comments when they slow things down. Our help desk get inundated with calls. So as you can see, we've got a unique user base. Now, nobody likes change, but the legal industry has a particular disdain for it. And to make things even tricky for us and our users, they hadn't seen a major change in the interface for about a decade. So this, as we highlighted before, is what it looked like. We've got this clunky top nav, bar. We've got some quick links at the top there, and then a list of orders that they've made that you can see the interactions in there, but a lot of it it doesn't make a lot of sense when you first look at it. Now, it's not great, but they were used to it. That's what they went to work on every day, and they knew how their way around it. So then we changed it to this. Now, as you can see straight away, it's a huge change. Those quick links, now called shortcuts, exist in that left sidebar. The nav is tidied up. You just have the nav items up the top there in the middle, and then your account details on the right there with the avatar and the settings icon. But we still have this central space left for all the orders, but now you can also tab through to matters. So this is quite a dramatic change for our users, and we have to find a way to ease them onto it and make it easy for them to use. So here are a few lessons that we've taken aboard as we've gone through this process of bringing this change upon. First one, let problems drive the solutions. So if a clear problem statement can't be articulated, there's likely no user problem being solved. And for instance, these shortcuts on the right here, they're customizable now, and that was driven by customer research and actually going out and spending time and interviewing our clients and speaking with the team internally as well. As we mentioned earlier, that the sales guys spend a lot of time, the AM spend a lot of time talking to our clients. And whilst it seems obvious now that this is a really beneficial feature, it really just came down to spending time with our clients and gathering those insights off of them. So in the new interface, users can pin can pin those services to the menu. So a couple of things that we've done here is that given it the exact same IA as the main nav, so they don't have to relearn the interface, they don't have to relearn how to find all their searches, and this makes it easy for them and reduces their cognitive load. So the second lesson, implement tools to help measure success. So we introduced this feedback toast, which has been an invaluable tool to collect quantitative and qualitative data. It's also been great at allowing us to benchmark user satisfaction and iterate on the experience. Now, we didn't get it right straight away, and that led to a bit of heartbreaking or heart-wrenching feedback initially, but that's all right. We learned from that, and I'll highlight that in a bit. Something else that we've done is that we established the UX success metrics. So by doing this, we can actually track the user behavior on the platform and then measure the performance of the new features that we've released. And this allows us to get that feedback and feed it back into that build, measure, learn loop that we all like and love so much. So the third lesson, help the user prepare and adjust to change. So in our excitement to release the new experience to our first 50 clients, we released it with pretty much no warning at all. And as mentioned before, this led to some pretty negative feedback. Like we delayed the UI feedback toast by a couple of weeks, and that helped a bit. It gave them time to adjust to it and learn the experience. But there are a couple of other things that we could have done, and this is just sort of highlighting those lessons that we learned and how we've implemented and sort of solved those problems since. So we created these in-app feature announcements. So these are modals that appear a couple of weeks before a new feature is released, or in the case that we're using it right now, as we're switching users over to the new UI. So it just pops up, gives them a bit of a warning, lets them know when there's a new feature coming, gives them a date, but it also allows them to start using it right now so they can make the leap themselves and just jump straight into the new experience or start using a new feature. We also introduced these coach marks and gave them an interactive guided tour around the interface, so just to help them become familiar with their surroundings. It's also a great way to provide an education on what features are available, especially new features, and show them how to use it and the benefits that they bring as well. So one thing that's important to note is that once we've done this, our feedback rating jumped significantly as well. We're getting a lot of feedback saying they didn't really know what was going on, why'd you change it? And then we released this, and then all of a sudden we're showing them just the cool new things. What else is also important to note here is that when we're releasing this, we're always communicating with the account managers and the sales guys, and they're telling us that some of the biggest issues that they had was just the change management. And more often than not, when someone complained and we hopped on a call with that client and showed them the new features, they're always more than happy to stay on the new UI. Like they realize it's actually pretty cool and it's going to save them a lot of time, particularly things like the customizable shortcuts and the ability to jump between matters and orders. And so implementing these coach marks just sort of cut out the middleman in a way. Like they could always straight away just get that guided tour and see what's available for them. And as I mentioned before, we've had some great feedback, and our UI ratings jumped up by about 25% since. It was groundbreaking actually, like just how crazy it was and how much good feedback we had on it. And the wider business is totally on board with it. And now we're looking at implementing these across other products as well. So not just the UI, but across all sorts of things that we do. We also gave them an opt-in and opt-out functionality. So it's just about giving the user control of what environment that suits them. So if we turned them on and they decided that they just didn't have time to learn the interface, they were busy or for whatever reason they wanted just to switch it off, we gave them that control. And that in turn gives us time to speak with them and learn that, get their feedback and learn from it and see what improvements we can make to bring them back onto it. Fortunately though, only 0.3% of our clients actually opted out, which is really cool and meant that we're actually doing something right. But sometimes, despite all this, you just have to roll it back. So one change that was too much for our users was the change to the IA. So initially we brought it out like this, and we're trying probably just to be a bit too fancy and have these cool interactive states as they move through the navigation. But despite that, and despite the configurable shortcuts and the new features, they hated this. We got so much negative feedback and they couldn't find anything. So what we did is that we just rolled it back to something that they're more familiar with. So now there's just one level of navigation and they can see all the searches and products available to them, just one click behind the menu. And again, when we did this as well, we had a huge jump in our rating. Again, it jumped by another point, 20% or so at the time. And then we just had great feedback, and we stopped getting all the comments like we can't find what we're looking for, all those sorts of things, and people started loving it again. So point 5, and this is the last one for me, change is easier when the user loves it. So as I mentioned before, we've done a lot of research with our clients. We spend a lot of time talking to them, interviewing them, and this is just one example of the many processes that they follow as they're trying to prepare a property sale contract. So when they do this, as you can see here, there are 6 main steps, but in between each of those steps are little mini steps as well, but they're generally grouped into here. You get your property information, you verify the title, order the title, find relevant certificates, order all the documents that go with the contract. Then you have to finally pull it all together and compile it. And this is just one screen out of the process. Now there's a couple of screens before this and several after it. They have to go through 2 programs if they're, some versions of our users, which come out of a practice management system. They have to come back into that and then compile everything there. So what we've done instead, and we've tried to find these efficiencies, is automate it as much as possible. So they've got their property information. From that, we can verify and order the title and get all the relevant certificates to pre-selected for them. They just have to click it and order everything for them, and then compiling it does it all by themselves. And we can save them 90% of the task time, and they only have to do it in a couple of clicks. And as you can see here, here's an example of that. So it's just, again, using that same design patterns that we've seen all throughout the new UI. But also, you know, it's got the flexibility here that they can review things if they want to, but in a nutshell, they've ordered the title and everything's pre-selected for them. And they have that flexibility to see what other things that they can. But then it's just a couple of clicks and it's done. So this is just generally a move to try and simplify the interface as much as possible. They still have the flexibility, as I mentioned, to do what they need, but everything's there, ready to go in just a couple of clicks. And it's like the best sort of interface is no interface, or the simplest interface, and just removing that complexity and making it easy for them. So now I'm going to pass it on to Andre, who's going to talk about the development side of things.
All right. So from a development point of view, being one of the main contributors to our component library, it's important for me to find the right balance between the designers and the designs that they've built, and the developers and the people that are going to consume it. So more often than not, I'm that middleman trying to find that right balance. So developers, including myself, we're creatures of habit. We have our own coding languages, coding conventions, favorite libraries, computer setups, you name it. Once you find something that works for you, you do not want to change. And being forced to change is, it's not going to work well. But despite this, the best chance for a consistent user experience is to have a single enforceable design system. So here are some of the things that we've learnt trying to kind of get our developers on board with our design system. Firstly, you need to onboard developers really early. You need to ensure that there's input from everyone who is going to be using it, who is going to be impacted by it, and ensure that you're incorporating that feedback, listening to it, and trying to compromise where possible. If you don't do this, then your developers, they might use it grudgingly because they have to, but that's going to be the extent of it, and they won't ever help to enrich it. What you want is something that everyone's going to be proud to use. It's going to assist developers, it's going to help them to do more in less time, and just empower them to get their jobs done. And so it's important to make it everyone's library as opposed to just my library or the UX team's library. And ways to make that happen is regular dialogue, incorporating their feedback, taking small steps instead of huge leaps, and where possible, you let everyone contribute. Even letting someone contribute the smallest amount just makes them feel so much more empowered. And then even with all of this, there will always still be conflicting views. As a contributor to our component library, I'm more mindful of how closely it adheres to the UX team designs, and I try to balance that with a developer's primary purpose, what they're interested in, which is just, does this do what I need it to do? The second thing that we've learned is that you need to balance the needs of the developer with the design system. So we had quite lengthy discussions about how strict versus loose we make our component library. In the beginning, it was quite loose in that developers could easily modify the components as they saw fit. It was very early on in the design system as well, so there weren't it wasn't as coherent as it could have been. And so as that's progressed, we've kind of decided that we need to make things a bit more strict. And the way to get developers on board was incorporating their feedback in that, and trying to strike the right balance between how strict you make it and ensuring that right interfaces exist for them to still get their job done. Third thing is that it's always a process of change. It doesn't matter who you're dealing with, change is the enemy. So you need to kind of iterate over that and try to make it as gradual as possible. So in the just over a year that Zenith has been around, we've already gone through 2 major iterations. The third one is currently being rolled out. There's always going to be things that you don't think about when you're designing, or you miss some things, you make some mistakes. Things work, some things don't, and so these are the things that you learn as you're building it, as you're going on, and you kind of iterate to reflect that. So the first iteration of Zenith was simply just components. There were simple building blocks like buttons, inputs, tables, just the bare minimum to kind of get some of the early designs built. The second iteration focused on kind of building a bit more of the complex components, increasing the longevity of the library, reducing the technical debt. One of the key things that we did in the second iteration was make it easier to theme all of our components, which again ensure that this is going to last into the future and be usable for all of the products that InfoTrack has. And then the third iteration, which we're currently rolling out, is kind of, we took a step back. We realized that, hey, we still have some of these bad behaviors from the first iteration that we might need to kind of iron out. So we're kind of slowing down a bit now with building new components, and we're just looking at how do we make this, the best that it can be, in that we want to get rid of all those bad behaviors, basically. And again, it's about, listening to the developers, keeping them informed about what changes they can expect, and just, keeping everyone happy, really. Do we have time for a quick demo tool?
Yeah, quickly jump in.
Yeah, I'll just quickly show you some of the, this is our component library. So basically, the first iterations, the basic building blocks, for example, avatar, this has existed from the very beginning. And still we have some tech debt. So this is kind of that great debate that we were talking about, how easy we can, make these components customizable. Whereas you look at, for example, our button, it is very much customizable. Sorry, let me just get that back. Okay, anyway, I've lost that, so.
There are all these props.
Yes, there are lots of props that you can. So basically, you can, we've provided every prop that's available for developers to modify the button in every possible way that they need to use it. Okay, so fourth thing that we've learned is, again, just following on from what we've said, you need to let everyone move at their own pace. So development teams all have their own roadmaps or their own priorities. Everyone's on strict deadlines and timelines. So you can't really force change. You can't create breaking changes that people aren't expecting. You're just going to get a lot of feedback. So this time around with our third iteration, we've reduced the number of breaking changes. We're providing warnings instead, to give developers a chance to get on board, without, I guess, the panic and the flames. So they might have the next 6 months or the next year to get on board before we remove those deprecated properties, and hopefully it'll be a lot smoother of a transition.
Cool. In summary, guys, so basically, as we've gone through this process, as mentioned, there's been a lot of lessons we've learned. So just to sum it up, from the wider business, you got to generate involvement and get that excitement going. Manage expectations, your own expectations and that of the wider business as well. You have to identify the values of each of the teams and find a way to bring the value of the design system to them as well. Find the right tools for you to use. As I mentioned, there's no right tool for everyone. You just got to find the one that works best for you. And be its biggest advocate. Don't stop talking about it. And every time you can, just bring it up. From the user's point of view, let the problems drive solutions. Measure the success. Use those tools that you can, like Hotjar and Google Analytics and those KPIs, and along with feedback toast. Also go out and talk to them as well and get that qualitative data. Help them prepare for change. Use coach marks. Get those things ready. And don't hold on to your ideas. Don't be precious about it. If it doesn't work for the users, then you have to try and find a way to get it to work for them. And design to their biggest values. Find what is the most meaningful value for them, and then design to match that. For the developers, get them on board early. get them excited, balance their needs, find what they need to do, and balance it with the designers, iterate and improve, and don't force the pace. So I'm going to open it up to questions. So I believe that there is a chat. So I think Dom's just going to review the chat and read any questions to us. So back to you, Dom. See if you've got anything for us.
Thank you very much, guys. That was awesome.
Thank you.
I thought it was a really in-depth question, talk about a lot of really complicated things, and it sounds like you know where your towels are, if you know what I mean.
Kind of.
Yeah.
One of the questions that I had on the side here is they seem to have everything right, and where do you have your playbook from?
I guess it's just. I'll jump in first. And
Yeah, you
could. Right.
Maybe you stop sharing your screen so we can see you better.
Okay, sure. There we go.
Go back to this.
Yeah, there we go.
Cool.
Stop presenting. There we go. Got there eventually. I'll jump in first. So I guess it's just come down to, we found our North Star when we first started. We realized just the mess that InfoTrack was in. We were meant to say nice things, but we'll be frank and say that the UI was a bit all over the place when we started. And from there, we just realized this is where we wanted to go. We looked at some examples like the IBM, Carbon, the Atlassian design system, material design system, and figured that that's where we wanted to go. And then it was just a matter of iterating. Like we started somewhere with Sketch and Envision. We used the tools that were familiar to us. And then as we expanded, we looked at more tools and see what worked there. And now we've just wound up at Figma, which works in terms of the design system, just having that one central source of truth that Kurt and I as a product designers can just iterate on as we go. And then Andre and the other developers can just jump into and see those iterations often as we're working on them at the same time. So it's just how cool Figma is.
And we very much learnt by doing as well. I think most of the valuable lessons we've learned, and there have been a lot of stumbles on the way. I think that the intention was to also show you some of the mistakes we made and some of the things that we didn't do correctly. And there are some ugly things in there that we just didn't think about properly. And I guess that's a bit of a double-edged sword you got to take when you learn by doing, and some things aren't that easily undoable. We did look at the start about all the design systems, and we did do a lot of research and looking at what companies did and how they structured everything. But then there were other things at the start we weren't really paying enough attention to what we were naming components when we were creating them. And then developers just took that name as fact, and then that got, built as the building blocks. And then all of those, variable names are now used throughout the code. And we wish that we could change them because they're not the right name. But unfortunately, that's just, one of the little quirks that now we are living with in our design system. It's a lesson we learned and one that we are now enabled to deploy for every new component or new building block that we create. But those little start ones are forever in there, named the wrong thing.
Yeah. Naming is hard. Don't beat yourself up. Because if you had waited for it to be named correctly, it would have probably still not be done. So it's probably a good trade-off. Okay, so here's a couple questions. A short question from the audience: is there a read-only link for the Figma files?
Yes, there is. There is. I'll have to think about whether we can share it actually. But if we're allowed to, I can let Dom know, and he can disseminate it to the audience somehow.
Yeah, we'll tweet it out. Yeah, I hear that you have readily access to lawyers, so I'm sure you can get to the bottom of it. Another question is, does the design system that you're using serve more than one product?
Yes. Now it does. It didn't at first.
So initially we started off just working across what was the home screen at the time, what we called the home screen as like a dashboard and the type of UI. But just recently, as in the last few months, we've also released another major project, WebVOI, using it, which is a huge release. So that's now rolled out to all of our clients there. We've also got Settle It using it, which is another one of our products, and Sign It has started using it as well.
Yeah,
awesome.
A lot of different electronic solution products for the law industry.
Yeah.
Electronic verification of identity, electronic signing, and also on the core platform, which is essentially just the interface people interact with to get all of the data and information that they need.
Yeah, nice. The follow-up question there was for the previous question. Even if you can't share Figma, maybe you can share Storybook. Maybe you can share both.
Storybook's actually even more locked down than Figma. That's only accessible behind our network. So
Yeah,
Figma possibly, but Storybook I think is going to be cool.
And I'm sure that I'm going to say 99% they'll be fine with it. I have to get the okay though first.
Of course. Okay. All right. Next question. Do you have a dedicated designer for the design system, or one owner, or do all designers spend a certain amount of time on the design system? How does that work?
This is it. It's just us three. Yeah. So Sam and I are the product designers on it. Andre's the development owner. We did start out. We did have more at some point, but unfortunately during COVID, there was some difficulties that we ran into, and we had to scale down the operation a little bit. But now it's us, and I will say it's a lot of work, and we are actually hiring, looking for another product designer right now to join the team.
I'll just shout out though, Kurt is probably the main instigator behind it. He's done an amazing job of pushing it through the company and making sure all the execs and everything are on board as well. So I just want to give him that.
Thank
you.
Yeah.
See, that's why the team works, because they're nice to each other. I keep saying that's the secret. No one listens. All right. The next question is, how did you decide what do your users, what do you want to do user testing on? Why did you decide to test one feature, not the other? For example, the AI feature, and what did you have to roll back? Like, did that go through user testing?
You can take this one.
Not per se. So I think lawyers can be tricky. Sometimes we don't get a whole lot of time with them, so we've got to try to fit a lot into maybe half an hour, 45 minutes if we can. So we test what we can. Like usually we go for like the high impact features, like the customizable shortcuts or like the main search and things like that. And we have quick link cards as well. They're like suggested actions, just making sure people understand how to use the interface. But a lot of the time we get organic feedback. So we'll get feedback from sales, we'll get, the account managers, and along with the feedback toast as well. So we get a lot through that. So we do have to rely on other teams, and we have a great communication network at InfoTrack, but everyone is just happy to talk to everyone else.
Yeah.
And we're super lucky in that sense that the teams, whilst we work on our own things, we're all on the same boat, rowing in the same direction. And everyone just wants to help and chip in. So we make sure that we keep those communications, those channels open. We have fortnightly catch-ups, the sales team and the account managers guys, and they just feed us whatever they have. We get a report every day with what feedbacks come through on the toast, the feedback toast, and that we use that to, we have like a affinity map going in Miro at the moment where we just track everything, and from there we're able to gather insights and make those changes as we see fit.
Yeah, and nice. I'll also say I think we're quite fortunate at our company because our clients are really happy to talk to us designers, and maybe that's something that not everybody else is aware of, but they love talking to designers because we're not there to sell them things. We're not there to try and take money off them. We're genuinely there to understand their problems and to make their experience better. So we've got an agreement with account management and sales where we're allowed to just call them up, ask them, maybe organize some informal testing. And whenever we have the capacity to do that, we always try to, because we get a lot of valuable feedback.
It's often just cold calling sometimes.
Yeah.
You just designate for half an hour on a Friday morning and just dial in some numbers and see who picks up.
Nice. Okay, we have to wrap it up because there's another fantastic talk coming up. Just 3 rapid questions, short answers. The new UI looks so good. How long did you spend on the brand refresh with the new look and feel and all the nice new components?
First one didn't look anything like that.
That's about 7 iterations into it. Like,
yeah, I mean, how that new one, we released that one as you saw it probably about 3 months ago. So that was 9 months in the making from day dot.
Nice. To get that. Nice. That's a good answer. 9 months. Thanks for the presentation from the audience. Did you have a mobile app as well?
No.
So users don't use mobile devices. They're always on their desktop with their PMS. It's just our user base. They're not a mobile users. But maybe. But
with any luck, like I don't know, we certainly want to explore that. It just comes down to the demand from the users at the end of the day.
Nice. And last question: how much of your time was spent managing and supporting the live site versus working on new stuff? Like, did you pause supporting the live site? Was there any code freeze?
Sorry, what was the question again? Sorry.
So the question is, did you have to go into the live site when you rolled it out, and did that mean that you have to stop developing on other things, or?
Right. So basically, so the old was still being developed and it is still being developed, and then we've kind of just taken product at a time and built the new UI, I guess. So yeah, and I think we're still supporting the old products even for a short time until we get everyone on board.
So just to put that in perspective, we have something, was it like 4,000 products of searches?
That's what they say.
Yeah, that's what they say.
4,000 products.
Like
I haven't seen 4,000 products.
But like they're sort of grouping things. So we've got to like take it like one at a time.
Yeah, fair enough. All right. Well, with that, just a reminder, as a shout out, InfoTrack is looking to hire. You want to say something about that?
Product designer.
Product designer.
Looking for another person to help us continue the growth of the Zenith design system, but also work on the development of all of the products that we work on. We want someone who, is fully fledged, that understands the testing process, generating, research and planning and conducting interviews and effective interviewing. So just, someone that has experience in all areas of product design to come and help us in this very fast-paced environment where we're extremely under-resourced right now.
Yeah. Awesome. Where should they go to reach out to you?
I think
there is careers at InfoTrack. There was also the job was posted on LinkedIn as well, product designer at InfoTrack. But I guess I can also just send it to my email and I can forward it on to HR.
Yeah. If anyone wants to, before you say out loud your email to everyone, if anyone wants to tweet it to me, and I'll connect you with a private message. That'll make it easier.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, everyone. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
See ya.